Hi everyone, welcome to my podcast, this one, and my YouTube channel. So today we're going to be talking a bit about, are you a natural born healer, psychic or shaman? How to get some hints and from your planetary positions in your birth chart. Now I use Vedic system, so I'll plot North Indian style Vedic system just for convenience sake. You can use any system you like, but I have seen the ascendants, if you're plotting using the Vedic timeline, sidereal timeline, it's kind of more accurate in terms of angles and degrees and that kind of thing. So it changes all the perspective of what's really going on with your astrological perspective. So are you a natural born? That's important to stress, because these new energies, everybody is waking up in one form or the other to their innate healing psychic and shamanic abilities. So don't just get carried away by this, saying that these are the only possible combinations. No, hardly. There are many combinations. But what we are going to focus on is from the nakshatra perspective or the constellation perspective. The concept of the 27 constellations in Vedic astrology. So there are 27 different constellations which appear within the ambit of the 12 zodiac signs. So within this 12, the 27 appear. We'll see in the pie chart that I will present. So where these ones fall into. Keep watching the video. Subscribe to my channel. Okay. So first some basics we'll get into so that we know what is our standpoint in evaluating a healer, a psychic, a shaman, broadly speaking. All the new age healers, herbologists, shamans, etc., etc. So what brings this energy in a person? That's important to know. Some are born that way, some can cultivate that way. Okay, so let's get into it. So some considerations I will be using are these: the ascendant zodiac nakshatra, the ascendant zodiac sign, and the nakshatra which you fall into is always following your bliss, in what I have observed in charts, in professional life. This is my practical experience. Otherwise, you might be feeling one way inside and doing something else on the outside. This is why people are unhappy with their professions, business, etc. They always feel drawn towards something else while they are doing something else. A doctor might be feeling like becoming a writer. An engineer might be feeling like going into physiotherapy. So it's very different what we end up doing. But what we think is our following, or what we call following our bliss, is basically the ascendant zodiac and the nakshatra in which you fall into within that ascendant zodiac. Okay. Now regarding shamanism, healing abilities, psychics, astrologers, etc., 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 these are the planetary combinations as per the Vedic system. We'll deal with them later as we go along. Venus, ironically, also stands for rebirth after death. I put quote unquote death because it is basically removal of the old energy and giving birth to new. Healers, what do healers basically do? They remove the old stuff which is not required so that the new can come in. So Venus also stands for that. In addition to artistic capabilities, beauty, sensuality, all that stuff, Venus also stands for this as per Vedic. We'll also be using Moon as body-mind healing, as well as for knowledge of herbs and poisons. Moon has both these nakshatras. We will see that later. Ketu, the south node, has the mystical knowledge of herbs and also has the moksha karaka, meaning the one who causes a person to look within, causes a person to disengage from materialism and go towards spiritual aspects. That's south node. Okay, it's almost like going to the other side of the veil. Saturn has access to lower dimensions, yoga, tai chi, etc., etc., bodily grounding of energy, because Saturn always wants to ground. Saturn is a gaseous planet that always wants to ground things in physical realm. Concrete structures. That's why Saturn also stands for bones, flesh and bones. So it's a physicalization of etheric knowledge, of abstract knowledge, of esoteric knowledge. Saturn, that's why, give access to lower dimensions. What do I mean by lower dimensions? I mean, not in a bad way. It's just like the people who are mediums, people who are psychics, astrologers even, they have to sense, feel, know as an intuitive ability. Some people have second sight about things. We are talking about these kind of esoterics here in this podcast. So Saturn is the one which gives you access to lower dimensions of existence, like ghosts, like mediumship, like psychic ability to sense things, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all those abilities, right? Beyond the physical, Saturn will give access to that. It's like the guardian of that. Mars as the courage and the drive to accomplish. It's very important to have the drive also to conquer fear around the psychic ability. Many people have psychic ability, they shut it down for fear of things. So if the Mars is not good around their chart, they may be psychics, but they may never use it. Remember, we're talking about professional ability here. This is in the playlist series of Discover Your Career. So we're talking about a career as a shaman, a psychic, astrologer, a healer, etc. Jupiter becomes access to higher dimensions of existence, higher knowledge, philosophical approach or traditional approach, depending upon how Jupiter is looking at things. So Saturn becomes lower dimensions, Jupiter becomes higher dimensions. Okay. These are the drivers for having a professional career as a psychic, healer or a shaman. Uranus, the higher mind, gives individuality. Uranus is a planet of individuation, maverick, clarity of thought and action, and intuition as well. It's big. Intuition is a big pillar when we talk of psychic ability. But Uranus is more like the galactic knowledge. People are, it's very common these days, they are channeling, Arcturians, Pleiadians, you name it, the higher dimensional beings, the galactic beings. So Uranus is a strong significator of that in the charts. And higher intellect and courage to implement. This is the basis we'll be using. Neptune, the higher heart, provides refined heart connection. Now Venus, Moon will provide the lower connection, as in the personal self, as in the ego's lower self, the egoistic self. Neptune will do a higher heart calibration, refined heart connection, like compassion, like empathy, combined with a very high intuition. Neptune, wherever it falls, provides high intuitive, dissolved ability in that particular house or the aspects of that particular house. Okay. Access to higher dimensions of universe. Okay. Neptune provides that. So that's the higher heart. Now, my suggestion, last bullet point here, is always to use the Vedic style chart to get a proper ascendant. I can't stress that enough, because the ascendant changes and it changes about everything. And in my practical experience, I have seen if you change the ascendant of a same person from Western to Vedic style of plotting the chart, it's basically calculations, it will change the ascendant by about 30 degrees. So if you're a Libran in Western, you might end up becoming Virgo in the previous one, in the Western one. So it changes everything, planet positions, everything, entire life path. So if you're looking at the wrong kind of chart, this particular series, this podcast won't be helpful to you, because you'll be seeing a chart in a different way, whereas actually your life path will be different. Second one will be to always look at the 8th house and or the 12th house for spirituality. 8th house is for occult, 12th house is for spirituality. So you might need to see which aspects and points and placements are there, which will give an amplified sense of connection to the other dimension. A person needs to be able to connect through their pineal, through their intuitive abilities to the other side. That's what makes a good psychic. It's even needed for astrology, by the way. Placement of planets or points. Points, I mean Rahu, Ketu, North Node and South Node. If you want to see different aspects, I have made separate video on that in the Progressive Astrology series. You can see planetary aspects and points video there. So you will know how the Vedic system uses the planets and points concept. It's different to Western because Jupiter looks at 5th aspect and the 9th aspect. Saturn looks at the 3rd aspect and the 10th aspect in addition to the 7th aspect. Mars looks at 4th and 8th. This is quite different, okay? So have a look at that and then we can dive in to the rest of this. Okay, moving on to the next. There are a total of 18 nakshatra ascendants that we will be using, right? There are only 12 zodiacs you can see in the innermost circle. But within this, each of these you can see in the outermost circle, different nakshatras landing, which are total of 27 in number. And the arrows are pointing towards only those which have the most dominant ability to be healers, psychic, shamans in that particular field, because this is a wide field we are talking about. There are lots of different kinds of things they can do. But each one seems to be built for a certain area of specialization within psychic, healer, shaman ability. The first one, as we can see here, is Ashwini Nakshatra, AS for short. They make good herbologists. We'll discuss in each one in the coming slides. Bharani will make good midwives or doulas. Kritika Nakshatra, good fire ceremonies, shamans. Kritikas have a good ability of control over fire. So people who do fire ceremonies, shamans who do fire ceremonies under Kritika, they become very powerful to clear old dead energy kind of thing. People in Rohini Nakshatra could make good herbalists. Mrigshira people could, within the Gemini Ascendant, could make good psychics. Punarvasu Nakshatra within Gemini Ascendant could make monks, spiritual teachers, mystics. Pushya Nakshatra people within Cancer could make again good spiritual teachers, nuns, priests, gurus, more orthodox. Ashlesha Nakshatra could make good psychics and tantrics. Magha Nakshatra could make occultists and tantrics. Chitra Nakshatra, CH, where the bottom of the pie, could make good herbologists. Anuradha Nakshatra can make good psychics and astrologers. Jyeshtha Nakshatra, now we are in the sign of Scorpio, under number 8. Jyeshtha Nakshatra could make good tantrics, mystics and psychics. Number 9, under the belt of number 9, Sag, we have Purva Ashada, who could make good psychics, mediums and herbalists. Under Uttara Ashada, when we come to Capricorn, we make Uttara Ashada people make good preachers, priests and counselors under certain planetary arrangements. Remember, all this is under certain planetary arrangements. You got to have those particular planetary arrangements that will be most significant. There could be others, but these are the most significant things to watch out for. In number 10, Capricorn again, under Dhanishta, we have these people could make good Kundalini Yoga teachers. They could be practicing Kundalini Yoga or Hatha Yoga or any of the physical stuff. The physical manifestation of life force, Kundalini. Then under 11, Aquarius, under Shattabisha, these people can translate they could be teachers of Tai Chi. They are translating esoteric knowledge to physical aspects. So Tai Chi, Zen, Qigong, etc. Any one of these practices which require physical body movement, these people will be very good at. Then we come to the last sign of Pisces under Uttara Bhadrapada, UB. They make good yoga, meditation experts, teachers, shamans, healers, tantrics. It's a wide belt under Uttara Bhadrapada. Under Revati, they make good psychics and hypnotics. So this is the broad range of 18 different ascendant nakshatras that we will be talking about in the slides to come. Now I'm going to talk a bit about giving some basics to the person who is unaware of the style of the chart and how Vedic astrology is organized. This number 1 to number 12 are the 12 houses as organized in the diamond chart of the North Indian style Vedic horoscope cast. Okay. So in the circle you can see number 1, 2, 3, 4 right up till number 12. That's the way it's organized. Those are the 12 houses. And the houses keep changing according to each type of ascendant. Okay. So we will see that, keep this as a reference when we go to all the rest of the 18 ascendants. It will give some clarity to you. Yeah. So the first house, and what are these planets doing sitting there in each one of the house? The first house, there is a concept in Vedic astrology called Karakas. Karaka means a doer, to put it very, very simplistically. Okay. Karaka is a person which does. So in case of planets, it brings the planetary energies to a particular house. It governs that particular house in terms of doership, what the planet provides. Each planet has an energies. You can look up my video in the playlist of progressive astrology of planetary energies. What does each planet bring? What does it signify? So the first house or the ascendant, the Karaka is the sun. The sun stands for soul. The soul being in the head. First house also stands for head, the brain. Okay. So sun rules that, meaning the sun is the sole guardian of a person's life. So everything is therefore driven from the ascendant. That's why I spoke of in the second slide of how important it's for you to get the ascendant correct. Because it's the signifier of your soul, what your soul wants to do. That's why we are measuring everything from the ascendant. Okay, even the nakshatras we are measuring from the ascendant, and you'll see how important this gets through the 18 slides which we are going to go through later. So I want to give this as an introduction. So sun, the first house, is your soul. That's what your soul wants to do this lifetime. People ask the question, what does my soul want to do this lifetime? Well, that's what it wants to do. And especially in the zodiac and within the zodiac, that particular nakshatra also, constellation. Nakshatra is nothing but constellation. The second house, which stands for family, wealth, etc., the Karaka is a Jupiter. The doer is a Jupiter. Jupiter energies come into the second house. Jupiter wants to provide you a good family, wants to provide you a good face. Second house also stands for face, beauty, physical beauty, the face. The third house, Karaka, is Mars because it stands for skills. It also stands for hands. Okay, physically our hands, both our hands, arms and hands. So what we do is, as in skill set with our hands in this world, Mars is the doership of that. Means Mars provides the drive for the third house. Third house has a Martian type energy. The fourth house is the house of home. So what do we want in our homes? We want moon, nurturing, motherly, caring and nurturing is the moon. We want Venus. Why? Because we want the homes to be artistic, beautiful, decorated with all the candles, all the good nice furniture, jacuzzi, whatnot. We want all the good things, material good things in our house. That's Venus. It also stands for Mars because Mars is also the driver for property, real estate. We want a good property. We want good gardens. We want good cars. That's the Mars, physical driver. The fifth house, which stands for education, romance, creativity and children, again Jupiter stands that. You can see right away there is a pattern here of how Vedic science interprets it. Jupiter has got 4 different houses which it governs, which it brings its energy to. Okay. So fifth house, Jupiter wants to give you education. Good education is important. A proper education person will be having more sound knowledge of things. Jupiter also provides good creativity here. Jupiter wants to provide you with children. Fifth house is the house of children as well. Sixth house is also the Karaka is Mars, because sixth house is for daily work. Mars is the drive to get things done. Okay, that's why Mars is the Karaka of the sixth house. Sixth house is also for enemies, debts, surgeries, everything a person gets in his life as a result of their bad karmas, quote unquote, comes in the sixth house. So also called the house of karma. In the seventh house, the house of spouse, intimate relationships, intimate partnerships. I'm just using intimate as a broad word. I'm not calling it necessarily spouse. You might be having a live-in situation, still applies. Seventh house is governed by Venus, because Venus wants to give, wants to bring in warmth, beauty, tenderness, love, intimacy. Okay, physical, mental, emotional, all kinds of intimacy. That's the seventh house. The Karaka is Venus. I'm using the same term so that you get used to it. The eighth house of occult, again of losses and gains, even of the physical organs, reproductive organs, everything. The Karaka is Saturn. Why? Saturn rules the lower dimensions. Remember, we spoke of in the second slide. The lower dimensions is ruled. The access to psychic knowledge is governed by Saturn. He's the guardian. He holds the guardianship, the doership of the 8th house. Also the 10th and 12th, as you can see. The 9th house of higher knowledge, of philosophy, of wisdom, of higher learning of children, of going into foreign lands. All of these things are governed again by Jupiter. Jupiter wants you to go to different places, different countries in the world. It wants you to get higher knowledge. It wants your children to get higher knowledge, etc., etc. Right? So Jupiter governs its Karaka of that. That means it brings its energy into that. In the 10th house of career, father, fame, recognition, etc., work in the house, fame and recognition in your career, success in your career and fame, there are 3 Karakas, just like the one for 4th. So that shows the 4th and importance of 4th and 10th right there. There are 3 guardians of each, 3 doerships, 3 Karakas. Saturn being one, Mercury being one, and Sun being the last. So Saturn, why? Saturn wants you to work. Saturn is a daily worker. Saturn wants to work daily, every single day of a person's life. He wants to work. He's the one who is a brick and mortar guy. He's the person who builds the entire skyscraper brick by brick, beam by beam. That's Saturn's energy. Mercury is the intellect, because you need intellect for success. You need to use your brains every day. So intellect is also figuring there in the 10th house. So is Sun. Sun, why? Because Sun stands for recognition. Remember, Sun was also the Karaka of the first house. The soul came here, your soul came here to shine in something. The 10th house governs that. Sun also rules that, also gives doership. It brings its energy there. It wants to achieve fame. Everybody wants to achieve some kind of recognition, success, and fame. It may not be fame in terms of being leader of a prime minister or a president of a country, but in your own circles, in your own family circles, perhaps. Most people just desire that. In the 11th house, which is the house of gains, elder siblings, again foreign travels, again social media, networking, larger community basically. The 5th house is of education in terms of your personal education. 11th house becomes what you give out to the rest of the world. Okay, opposite houses. So 5th and 11th, as you can see, both are governed by Jupiter. What you give out to the world? What is your knowledge and wisdom? What are you sharing with the rest of the world? Like how I'm sharing through this podcast. What are you sharing? What have you got to give back to society? Again, ruled by Jupiter. Last one, the 12th house of spirituality, of renunciation, of spiritual intuition. In this case, it becomes very important when you are dealing with psychics, shamans, healers, etc. Mediumship, teachers of yoga, teachers of higher knowledge, mystical teachers, mystics, etc., etc. So as you can see, both 8th and the 12th house, which we are going to deal with in this podcast, are ruled by Saturn. So Saturn becomes a very governing aspect of knowledge, intimate knowledge of spiritual ability. That any in this podcast we are talking about any category. The placement of Saturn, you will see, are placed more and more in the 8th and 12th houses, as the case may be. The doership of spiritual knowledge. The guard is Saturn. the knowledge is also provided by Jupiter, but the guardianship is by Saturn. Okay. Now, it's a mysterious thing about Saturn's duality that it wants to ground in the 10th house, it wants to do daily work in the 10th house, and yet it wants to finally dissolve all that and become spiritual. So this is the duality of Saturn itself. Okay, so just keep this slide in mind, and this is how we are going to see the first. When I say first house, it always means that diamond over there. Even though the numbers keep shifting through rest, the house is always constant. The first house is always constant in all the 18 charts. Second house means always that triangle over there. The 6th house means always the lower triangle over here. So, and the 8th house is also this particular triangle. 10th house means this diamond over in the right side. So this arrangement to 1 to 12 houses will remain constant. What will keep changing is the sign of the ascendant itself. For example, in Aries, the first house is in the first house. In Taurus, the number 2 will come in number 1. You see? So that's the way it goes. I just want to give a brief introduction to this. Otherwise, for a person not knowing Vedic astrology, this becomes all fuzzy. I don't want you to have fuzzy knowledge. It goes a lot more into many aspects, but for the purposes of this podcast, we will be using this as the basis. Okay? First, we'll look at Aries Ascendant. This one as a herbologist. Okay? So as you can see, the Ascendant is in the first house, pointed at Ashwini Nakshatra. Now this Ashwini constellation tends to bring the knowledge of herbs. Ashwini Nakshatra was had the knowledge of rejuvenation of herbs. You know, it's a very the knowledge of the gods about herbs. Okay, so that's what Ashwini stands for. Now, if Aries Ascendant has Ascendant pointed towards Ashwini, it gives them a natural inclination towards herbs, towards curative herbs. Okay. That's why that would make a herbologist, but with this combination. As you can see, Jupiter is conjunct Moon in the 4th house. This is a very exalted sign because Jupiter looks at from here in the 4th house, it looks at 8th house and the 12th house as 5th and 9th aspects, both of which stands for occult and spirituality. But Jupiter brings in a good energy there. And Moon in Ashlesha being a sign of knowledge of poisons, knowledge of what needs to be cured, is also present. And Mercury in Magha Nakshatra, Magha being ruled by Ketu and all about the ancestral energy, and 5th house being the house of education. This person will want to study all about herbs with this Jupiter Moon and this Mercury combination. They will be inclined to. And with Mars in the 9th house, they will want to get a higher education in that. They will want to study more. They will want to get higher wisdom, knowledge. In Mula Nakshatra, Mula is also going to the root of the matter. In 9th house, it can be exalted if Mars is present there. A drive to accumulate knowledge in that field. Venus in the 12th house and Revati Nakshatra is also exalted because Venus is exalted in this particular sign of Pisces. But Venus here becomes very spiritual. It becomes very devotional. In Revati, it wants to give. It wants to nourish. It's not about personal sense of beauty and artistic capability, but it translates to higher wisdom. And with that combination of Jupiter and Moon conjunct in the 4th house, this will make them very good herbologist. Knowledge of herbs, maybe Ayurveda, maybe one of these other forms of herbologists that are evolving, maybe Vika. Now I've added children of the shift here between 1993 and 1996. Why? The shift, as we know, whoever's watching this, I'm sure you've heard of the shift of consciousness on Earth. Started in 1987, going up till 2030. But these children of the shift, why I call them that, is because this 1993 to 1996, there was a very unique conjunction of planets, arrangement of planets. There was Pluto in Scorpio, moving into Anuradha Nakshatra, and there was Uranus and Neptune conjunct in Uttarashada in the sign of Capricorn. So Pluto and Neptune and Uranus were conjunct in Capricorn under Uttarada Nakshatra, Uttarashada, and Pluto was started moving through the sign of Scorpio in 1993 to 96. So this is a very, very unique combination. Occurs once. The Neptune-Uranus conjunction occurs only once every 168 years. So what does this provide these children with? These are 20-somethings now. Neptune and Uranus combination, this is the higher heart and mind combination. And in the sign of Capricorn, it tends to ground. So grounded knowledge of whatever they are seeking. Also, we have assumed Saturn in the 10th house in Shravana Nakshatra. So this combination, these people would make powerful herbologists, Ayurvedic practitioners, etc., etc. Okay? That's the first one. The second one in Aries, we are going to talk about are the ones who are capable of becoming midwives, the doula, the midwives. Aries as midwives. You might think, how is that possible? Well, if the ascendant is pointed to Bharani Nakshatra is governing the womb, okay, and everything to do with the womb. So, if the ascendant is pointed towards Bharani within the sign of Aries in the first house, Mercury being in the third house of skills, they'll become very good at communication with their hands, because midwives need to have a good set of hands. Jupiter in the fourth house, again looking at the fifth aspect, looking at the eighth house, and ninth aspect looking at the 12th house. So Jupiter looks at Venus placed here, which will give them access and intuitive knowledge, because 8th house is for intuition and occult and mysticism. When it is in Anuradha Nakshatra, it gives them a high degree of intuition. In a feminine way, the feminine intuition becomes very powerful here. Now, Moon, I have placed it here in Hasta Nakshatra because it has to do with hands. So the daily work in the 6th house stands for daily work, will involve the use of hands, but with an emotional touch. Moon. In the 9th house, again I have retained Mars in Mula Nakshatra. This will also give them a very good set of higher knowledge with regard to midwifery. Again, I have included the children of the shift, 1993 to 1996, who are 20-somethings now, because they had a unique combination of Neptune and Uranus conjunct in Capricorn in the nakshatra of Uttarashada, as well as Pluto going through the eighth sign of Scorpio. Eighth sign of Scorpio falls in the 8th house in Aries. In other ascendants it will change, other signs it will change. We'll see that. So that combination is very powerful, very, very powerful. Okay, Pluto will recalibrate the sense of secrecy and hidden knowledge which usually Scorpio tends to hide. It will bring it out in the open. There can be no secrets. And Uranus and Neptune conjunct will bring higher mind and heart together. Very high degree of intuition. Very high degree. And Saturn here once again in Shravana Nakshatra makes them do the daily work. Saturn is a workaholic. It makes them work. This is in the house of career, so it is exalted here. Next we take Taurus. Taurus, one of the things that Taurus can become good at, because they have the sign nakshatra of the sun, Kritika Nakshatra, very, very strong nakshatra ruled by fire, Agni. So the fire ceremony, shamans who do fire ceremony, cutting cords, severing negative entities, that kind of a very, very powerful work, that the shamans are capable of, who deal with fire ceremonies. These people born in this kind of an arrangement which is shown in this chart can make excellent shamans with fire ceremonies. First of all, the ascendant is pointing to Kritika Nakshatra. Kritika Nakshatra is the sign of Agni, is the sign of cutting things off. Okay? We need to remove the bad energies wherever they are present, in the land, in the people. As obviously anyone who's watching this will know and appreciate. So ascendant and the sun being both pointed at Kritika Nakshatra is really a powerful combination of a fire ceremony shaman. Now, let's look at the other arrangements. Ketu being in Magha Nakshatra in the 4th house, Ketu or the south node, MA is Magha Nakshatra, that's a sign of Leo, which is looked upon by the 9th aspect of Jupiter sitting in the 8th house in Mula Nakshatra. MO is Mula Nakshatra. If you don't know where the nakshatras are, have a look at my other videos where I explain a little bit. So Jupiter, 9th aspect, which is the higher learning aspect, looks at south node, which is placed in Leo. Now Magha Nakshatra is ruled by Ketu, and Magha Nakshatra has the knowledge of ancestry. You need to have the knowledge of ancestry in order to carry out heavy duty stuff like cutting cords, severing negative entities. You need the help of ancestors. Shamans work a lot with ancestor energy. So this Jupiter and Ketu combination gives a powerful access to ancestors, because Jupiter is sitting here in the 8th house of occult, mysticism, the other side. Saturn, on the other hand, looks at Vishakha. He is sitting in Vishakha. Vishakha is also a nakshatra of splitting apart. So Saturn here gives powerful access to removing stuff which is not needed as a daily work. 6th house is for daily work. It looks at, on the opposite side, Saturn looks at 12th house, the house of spirituality, which is again governed by Saturn. It's the Karaka of the 12th house, where Mars is sitting in Ashwini. So this combination of Saturn looking at Mars from the 6th to the 12th becomes a powerful aspect for a shaman. Once again, I have pointed out here the children of the shift, those born between 1993 and 1996, who are 20-somethings right now. They were born with a very unique combination, something that occurs only once every 168 years. Okay, that is Neptune and Uranus conjunct in Uttarashara, which is governed by Sun in Capricorn, which gives them very high access to ancestral knowledge, to higher and lower knowledge, higher and lower dimensions, but because this Uttarada Nakshatra is governed both by Saturn and Jupiter. So wherever Saturn and Jupiter are placed, it will be very exalted for these people. And now you have put higher mind and higher heart there, so very high degree of intuition, unconventional knowledge. At the same time, Pluto was going through Scorpio in Anuradha Nakshatra. And Anuradha Nakshatra for Taurus people will sit in this house of spouse, the 7th house. So it will completely probably recalibrate or dissolve their sense of relationships with spouse. They might not have a very good romantic relationship, or they might bring about a new kind of romantic relationship also. Be aware that the planetary arrangement I am saying may not necessarily give a good personal life, but it will definitely make them very good shamans of fire ceremonies. Okay? Now we'll talk about Taurus Ascendant, but this time as herbalists. Now, how would Taurus make a good herbalist also? If the ascendant is pointed in the in the 1st house of Taurus, which, as we can see, is number 2 here, is pointed at Rohini Nakshatra. Rohini stands for everything material, concrete stuff, jewels, money, that kind of stuff. But now we are talking about an arrangement of planets in the chart which is good for making a herbalist, very good for making a herbalist. Let's see that. Venus in the 1st house will amplify in the nakshatra or constellation of Rohini. In the 3rd house we have Cancer, as you can see, and we have put in Moon there. If these people are born with Moon in Ashlesha in the 3rd house of skills, they would want a very soft emotional touch towards developing their skills. They would be drawn more towards herbs, spices, that kind of thing. The knowledge of food, the knowledge of herbs, Ayurvedic sciences kind of thing. Jupiter in the 5th house of learning is exalted here because it sits in the house where Mercury is exalted. I have put Jupiter in Chitra Nakshatra. Remember, each of these planets, I have put it in a particular nakshatra within a particular zodiac sign. That's why it's a very specific arrangement. Jupiter from here looks at the 5th aspect of the 9th house, which is of higher learning, okay, as well as the 2nd house. Sorry, the ascendant, not the 9th house. I was kind of getting that mixed up. Okay, so Jupiter looks at the 9th house and it looks at the ascendant. So Jupiter becomes very powerful. So Jupiter looks at Venus and it looks at the 9th house of higher learning. So these people will want to learn about that moon when they have education. They might want to get educated in the knowledge of sciences of herbs, like Ayurveda, for example. Saturn in the 6th house in Swati gives them a daily work and a sense of independence. They develop very individualistic work stance. And it also looks at the opposite house of 12th, where Sun is sitting in the Ashwini Nakshatra, which has ancestral knowledge. Because knowledge of herbs is all with our ancestors, the indigenous people, the yogis and the rishis of the past. So Sun in the 12th house here will draw them towards the spiritual aspect of things, towards ancestral energy, will give them intuition about herbs, very intuitive people. And with Saturn looking at that, it will make them want to work in that direction. Saturn wants to work in certain areas. So children of the shift, once again, the ones who are born between 1993 and 96, who are 20-somethings now, they had a unique combination additional to all. If it comes additional to all of this, they'll make really powerful ones, because Uranus and Neptune are conjunct in the house of learning in Uttarashada, in the 9th house. And Jupiter is looking at that. So Jupiter will be looking at the conjunction of Neptune and Uranus. Very, very powerful combination for higher learning. Okay, because Neptune and Uranus combined will give such a high degree of intuition and knowledge, which is not earthly. Okay, that's what you need for making a good herbalist. At the same time, Pluto was in Scorpio when this conjunction was occurring. These two happened at the same time. So this will give them not such a good personal life, because they'll not have a good relationship with the spouse, or they might recalibrate what is the sense of spouse completely in the world. Pluto looks at the whole world. Now let's look at Gemini Ascendant. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Communication, mind, intellect. So how would they make good psychics and astrologers? This is knowledge of the other side, knowledge of dimensions, knowledge of astrology. Being a sign of Mercury and ascendant being at Mrigashira. Mrigashira is symbolified by head of a deer. It's constantly hunting. They make extremely good researchers. They can get into the depth of things because their mind and intellect is constantly searching for things. So ascendant, if it's in Mrigashira, they become good researchers generally. Now Jupiter in the 2nd house in Ashlesha gives them knowledge of psychic knowledge, because it is also looking at the 8th house here. In the 8th house I have put Ketu in Shravana Nakshatra and Saturn. Saturn is in its own house, its own zodiac, as well as it's in Dhanishta. So it will be looking at all the ancestral aspects. It will bring in very good knowledge of the lower dimensions, this combination of Ketu and Saturn. Plus, this will dissolve their sense of wanting material gains too much. See, these people who are psychics, astrologers, cannot be drawn towards materialistic world, because they need to go and fetch wisdom and knowledge from the other side, which is hardly materialistic. At the same time, I have put Mars in Chitra in the 4th house, which gives them a high degree of creativity drive, looks at the 10th house, which has Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada. So Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada here will give them the knowledge. The ascendant is always looking at this, where Mercury is placed. So their daily profession would be speaking. Psychics and astrologers need to be constantly speaking about something. Or they have to cast horoscopes, or they have to plot charts like how I'm doing here, right? Psychics, they need knowledge from the other side. In Uttara Bhadrapada, it will give knowledge of the other side because it's the 12th sign of Pisces. Mercury in Pisces will give them very high intuitive ability which the psychics need. So the combination of Saturn in 8th house and Mercury in 10th house makes them powerful psychics, okay? Venus in Mrigashira in the 12th house will again give a high degree of intuition and ability to guide people out of their situation. Because we are talking about psychics here. More than astrologers, this Venus is for psychics. They need to be able to read into something, a tarot card reader or whatever it is, to tell people out of their tricky situations of life, be it health, relationship, business, career, etc. So Venus will give them that ability. Venus is exalted in the 12th house, and it's being in its own sign, it's in a very exalted position here in Taurus. So that's the first one, the Gemini. The second one, the Gemini, will make monks, spiritual teachers, mystics, like Eckhart Tolle perhaps, or like Sadhguru perhaps. So this Gemini ascendant with this kind of arrangement will make them communicate spiritual teaching, communicate mysticism. They will want to talk because it's still in the house of Gemini, right? These kind of teachers are very outspoken. So here with this combination of ascendant to Punarvasu Nakshatra, Punarvasu is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is also sitting there in the 1st house, makes them wise old souls. Monks, spiritual teachers, mystics are old souls who have come to revive this planet back to its old wisdom. So Jupiter in the 1st house looking at Punarvasu will make them very inherently wise. They bring wisdom from their past life. Also, Mercury in Mars in Chitra, we have left it as it is, looking at Mercury in Uttara Bhadrapada as it is. But Jupiter has moved here. When Jupiter moves into ascendant, it looks at the 5th house and 9th house, both its own houses. Makes them very educated people, drive towards getting educated in all kinds of sciences, drive towards higher learning of philosophy in the 9th house. And Moon and Venus conjunct, Moon in Rohini and conjunct Venus in Mrigashira makes them powerful mystics. Because Moon, when it's in the 12th house, it becomes very spiritual. Along with Venus in 12th house here, which is in its own sign of Taurus, will make them really powerful mystics. Because they'll be drawn towards it. It's what they want to seek. They are seekers of all kinds. Gemini is seeker. Now, the children of the shift who were born between 1993 and 96 have additionally the combination of Pluto in Scorpio, which comes in their 6th house, and Uranus and Neptune conjunct in the 8th house. This additionally, if they have to this other charts, personal planets, will give them even more high sense of intuition, power, because Pluto will look at 12th house from here. Uranus and Neptune already being in the house of occult in the 8th house. These kids are really, they'll be channeling all the time right from a young age. Now they are 20-somethings. So is your kid having a hard time with access to other dimensions? We can find out and explore more if you like. Now let's talk about Cancer Ascendant, who can make good spiritual teachers, nuns, priests, and gurus. So, Cancer Ascendant, when does it become very spiritual? When Ascendant becomes pointed to Pushya Nakshatra. Pushya is a very nurturing sign. These are the people who would like to do well in childcare industry. It's the mother energy of the moon, because the fourth house has landed in the ascendant, in the head. But if Saturn, which is amplified in Pusha Nakshatra, is sitting in the ascendant, as is shown in the first house, Saturn, ascendant towards Pusha, and Saturn is in the ascendant in Pusha. Here Saturn becomes a very giving energy. It wants to care about people. It wants to nurture people. Okay? It wants to nurture even the spouse, if they have a spouse. It looks at bringing in a nurturing energy. The moon becomes more motherly than the typical lustful one that it is. Okay? Now Saturn here brings in higher knowledge, because the 10th aspect, their career, they will be driven towards the 10th house, from 10th place from Saturn, which is the 9th house. So Saturn here will be seeking higher knowledge all the time throughout life, and they will want to communicate that. Communicate it how? We have Mercury in Magha Nakshatra in the second house. Speech. Their speech will become very powerful. They're powerful speakers. Especially in the fourth house, conjunction of Moon and Venus. The conjunction of Moon in Chitra and Venus in Swati will make them very individualistic thinkers. And being in the sign of Libra, Venus is exalted. So they will want to become good teachers here. They make very good teachers. And Jupiter sitting in the 12th house from Punarvasu, which is its own nakshatra, looks at this fourth house, this combination, this conjunction of Moon and Venus. So Jupiter brings in that spiritual angle of higher dimensions, intuition, etc. from the 12th house into this fourth house of conjunction of Moon and Venus. So these people definitely make good spiritual teachers, nuns, priests, etc. Okay. We've also added Rahu in Shattabisha in the 8th house. 8th house is for occult and mysticism, but Rahu here doesn't do very well as such, because Rahu wants material things. But being in the 8th house, it becomes a seeker of spiritual truths. It becomes interested in occult matters. And with the Ketu always being opposite of Rahu, it will be sitting here with Mercury. So it's a very dissolved form of communication, channeling. These people might be good channelers. Natural ability to channel. And Sun in the 10th house will also, in Ashwini, will give them ancestral knowledge, as well as they might even become famous, because Sun in 10th house is a Karaka, so they will become good in their career. Famous people, famous teachers, famous spiritual teachers come with this kind of an arrangement. Now I've included children of the shift, children who are born between 1993 and 96, who are 20-somethings now. They came in with an additional powerful combination of Pluto in Scorpio and Uranus conjunct Neptune in Capricorn, in the sign of Uttarashada, in the constellation of Uttarashada. So these people will be, as it is, they are spiritual teachers and nuns. Remember that. But now with this additional powerhouse sitting in the 7th house, these people will redefine what it is to have a romantic relationship. They'll redefine romance. These kind of Cancer ascendants, their focus will be to bring higher knowledge, higher dimensional knowledge into what it is to have a relationship, what it is to have a spouse, what it is really a romantic partnership, a life partnership about. They might want to bring that. And with Pluto sitting in the 5th house, they might not do very well in their regular education. So be watchful. If you have a Cancer ascendant kid and he's not doing very well at school, don't be worried. They've come in here for something else. Okay. Now let's look at Cancer ascendant, who can make good tantrics, psychic healers. The healing ability of knowledge from the other side of the veil. Okay, so what kind of kids would bring in that? What kind of people would have this? Well, I put the best possible arrangement. There are other possible arrangements if you want to check out your chart, but this is the basic energy I'm giving you here. Okay, you can check your charts for it. So as previously in the previous Cancer one, we have left Jupiter in Punarvasu in the 12th because it's very exalted. And in the 9th aspect of Jupiter, it looks at the 8th house of occult. So it brings the very high aspect of occult knowledge into the 8th house. Saturn being here in the 8th house, which is the Karaka of occult, will bring in the knowledge of the lower dimensions. So Jupiter will bring them knowledge of higher, Saturn will bring them knowledge of lower dimensions. Yes, and Venus in Swati in the 4th, which is looked upon by Jupiter, will give them wisdom in spirituality. Wisdom. Okay, access to psychic side may be easy, but do you bring in wisdom with that? Jupiter will provide it in this arrangement. And how they make good tantrics and healers is because there is moon in the ascendant, exalted in Cancer in the 1st house, and moon is in Ashlesha nakshatra. Ascendant itself is pointing towards Ashlesha. Ashlesha symbol is a snake, a cobra. This is the energy of Kundalini. This is the energy of bringing in all the knowledge of the psychic knowledge of Kundalini. That's how they make good tantrics. Healers, because it also has knowledge of all the poisons. The knowledge of the poison, even the knowledge of poison as to cure, like homeopathy, like we talked about, who can make good doctors, right? So they also bring in good knowledge there. Even these people can make good homeopaths. Now let's talk about Leo Ascendant. Typically in the mainstream pop astrology, Leos are considered as leaders, as charismatic people. But when do they make good occultist and tantrics? Is there a combination? Well, let's have a look. If the ascendant is pointed at Magha Nakshatra, and if there is Ketu, the south node, Magha Nakshatra is ruled by Ketu, it will always take them, they will have a dissolved sense of self, they will have very less ego, they will be constantly seeking for who they are, which is needed as a prerequisite for being an occultist and tantric. First of all, the human has to be interested in it. So Ketu will bring that interest in researching the deeper aspects. Who am I? Who are my ancestors? What is ancestral energy? It will take them powerfully towards that, and Ketu amplifies it. Ketu will give them here in the 1st house in Magha, will give them powerful access to their ancestral knowledge. Okay. Moon in the 12th house in Ashlesha in the sign of Cancer is exalted. This moon is very, very exalted, and being in Ashlesha, like we spoke of in the Cancer one, gives access to poisons, gives access to occult knowledge of Kundalini. Being in the house of 12, house of spirituality, moon here becomes very spiritual. So moon in Ashlesha has also got knowledge of Tantra in being in the 12th house. And Saturn in the 8th house of occult will give them knowledge of lower dimensions. It has got direct access to people, to the entities, beings on the other side. I know a personal friend who has Saturn in the 8th house, and I know what kind of work she does. So this is definitely a combination for occult knowledge. Mars in Ashwini will give them the drive to get into the higher knowledge. Okay, because Jupiter here from 4th house also looks at the 8th house and the 12th house. So the eyes of Jupiter are there on that moon and on that Saturn. So Jupiter from the 4th house will provide them wisdom, knowledge. 4th house even stands for home, family. So these people will have a very wise upbringing. These people will make good occultist and tantrics, not the nasty ones that you see around. Okay, it's important that people use the esoteric knowledge and the science of other side of spirituality, of psychics, mediums, etc. They be good people also. So I am putting together a kind of combination everywhere in each one of these signs who will make good people, who will serve the society. Okay, so children of the shift, what is this about? Well, all kids born between 1993 and 96 were born in the shift, which is ongoing right now, right? The shift of the planet. They were born with a very unique combination in their charts. All the Leo Ascendants, by the way. let it be Magha or Purva Falguni, they were born with this combination. So, which is Neptune and Uranus in Uttarashada in the 6th house and Pluto in the 4th house. So, they might not have a very good home front. Their home front might get destroyed, or they might be disjointed or feel isolated from the home front. Pluto typically dissolves whatever house it sits in. But don't worry about that. These kids have come for a different reason. Neptune and Uranus in Uttarashada in the 6th house. These kids will recalibrate what it is to work daily. Their sense of daily work they will think about, and they will change it. They will change it for good. What does it mean to work? Because 6th house is for daily work. They will also dissolve their enemies, because this combination, their enemies cannot stand against them. This will make them powerful leaders. Leo ascendants are also for leaders. So depending upon where Sun is, if Sun is sitting in the 10th house, these people will make excellent leaders, revolutionary leaders, politicians, etc. Now let's talk about Libra ascendants as herbologists. What makes a Libra ascendant a herbologist? Well, ascendant now is pointed toward Chitra Nakshatra, which is very physical. It's artistic. It wants to do things with hands. They also make good musicians, artists of all kinds, painters, poets. Well, not so much poetry, but yeah, artists. Ascendant in Chitra, within the sign of Libra. With Venus in 12th house in Hasta. Knowledge of herbs, but Hasta is working with hands. Spiritual knowledge of working things, making herbs, making concoctions, making potions of all kinds, that kind of a thing. With Mars in Shravana Nakshatra in the 4th house, as you can see. And Jupiter in the 6th house in Uttara Bhadrapada, and Mercury in Rohini in the house of Occult. So these people can channel a lot of wisdom. Mercury in 8th house will be channeling ability. And then Ashlesha, in the 4th house, there are Moon in Ashlesha in the 10th house, which is exalted Moon. Moon in Ashlesha will give them ability or capacity to understand the knowledge of herbs, understand the knowledge of poisons. So this will make them good herbologists, right? Because Jupiter looks at this house, at the 5th aspect. So this Jupiter will amplify the knowledge of herbs for this person. Now for Libran ascendants, children who are born in the shift between 1993 and 96, they have an additional unique combination in their charts. In the 4th house, they have Uranus and Neptune conjunct in Uttarashada, which is a sign of Sun. So they will be powerful leaders in whatever they set their minds to. In this case, they have set their minds to home and family. What it means to have home and family. The sense of home and family in the 4th house will undergo. They will want to revolutionize it. What does it really mean to have a comfortable home? Where should we have homes? Should we live in cities or small towns or communities? They will change all that. Additionally, they will change the sense of family, because Pluto is sitting in their 2nd house. Sense of family. What is it to have family? Because Pluto changes, transforms whatever house it sits in. So these kids are going to change the knowledge of that as well, in addition to becoming a herbologist, of course. Now let's look at Scorpio Ascendant. When does a Scorpio Ascendant? Scorpio, as we know, is a very mystical sign, mysterious sign. So it has 2 nakshatras in them, Anuradha and Jyeshtha. So both of these can make a psychic, astrologer, mystic, etc., etc. But when? Under what combination? Well, let's look at some possible ones. This is for psychics and astrologers. So Venus sitting in the 12th house in Swati makes them very individualistic as well as spiritual, access to spiritual dimensions, death and rebirth kind of energy. Because Venus also rules rebirth after death, can bring the dead back to life. Okay, so it makes them good psychics and astrologers. Jupiter in the 2nd house in Mula will want to make them dig deep into the ancestral knowledge. It gives them wisdom there. innate wisdom, because Jupiter is still in the second house. It has not matured. But it looks at the seventh aspect of Sun in Punarvasu. Sun sitting in the 8th house here. In the house of Mercury will give them channeling ability. And that Sun looks at Jupiter. Jupiter looks at the Sun. They both are looking at one another. This is a highly charged combination. These people will want to always go towards the psychic aspect and get knowledge about that. Saturn in the 4th house will look at the 10th house of where Mercury is sitting in Magha. Wants to dominate the field of psychic. These people might become a little bit of dominant. Okay. Sun kind of is in a very dissolved state here because it is sitting in the 8th house. In the house of hidden secrets, Sun is sitting. So Sun wants to shine. If it is sitting in the hidden house, it kind of becomes subdued, which is what we need here. Ketu in the 1st house in Ashwini will give them knowledge towards ancestry, will make them work in a direction. Astrologers, what work do? They do mystical work on a daily basis. So this house of daily work, there is Ketu sitting in Ashwini, which is exalted, which will make them want to go towards the psychic aspect of things as a means of career, as a means of daily work. Now, for Scorpio Ascendant kids who were born between 1993 and 96, the children of the shift, they were born additionally with another unique combination. They were born with Pluto in Anuradha, which is, they were born with Pluto in the Ascendant. They might have even had, if Pluto is in the Ascendant, they might have difficulties with birth. They might have come near death experience in the birth itself or in the early years, because Pluto is a lot of death as well. And they were also born with Neptune and Uranus in the 3rd house of skills. They will recalibrate what is it to have skill, what is it to have, do something with the hands. They might have powerful hands-on healing abilities with this combination. Psychic energy through the hands, chiropractors, that kind of a thing. Chiropractors, reflexologists, all kind of healing modalities, even Reiki, which needs the healing of the hands. Being in Scorpio Ascendant, they might do this very powerfully. Powerful healers. Scorpio Ascendant who can make tantrics, mystics and psychics. Now Tantra will require the knowledge of Kundalini. Therefore, I have put here in this combination Venus and Saturn in the 12th house conjunct. Saturn in Vishakha, Venus in Swati. Both together in the house of Libra will make them powerful transformers, powerful Kundalini energy, life-giving energy. Okay, being in the 12th house of spirituality and being in the house of Libra, they will want to bring this to the rest of the world. That's why Saturn is very exalted here. And it looks at the 6th house, where it is a house of daily work, where Ketu is sitting in Ashwini. And of course, Rahu is sitting in the 12th house. So they will be obsessed about knowledge and bringing daily work as a mystic, as a tantric or psychic. In the 8th house, I have added Jupiter and Sun together conjunct. This is once again a powerful aspect, because it looks at the 2nd house. Jupiter and Sun will look at the 2nd house, so their speech will become powerfully mystical. They might just be channeling all the time with higher dimensions, channeling the Arcturians, the galactic knowledge, because Jupiter goes to higher dimensions like Saturn goes to lower ones. So lower and higher, both in a more recalibrated form. 9th house has Moon in Ashlesha, which gives them knowledge of Tantra again. Ashlesha will give them knowledge of Tantra at a more grounded level. And Mercury in the 10th house will want to make them communicate. Their daily profession would be more in the lines of communication. Okay. Now, if you have noticed, Mercury and Sun have made a Parivartan Yoga. What does Parivartan Yoga means? Means Mercury is sitting in the house of Sun, Sun is sitting in the house of Mercury. So this will make them bring that occult knowledge from the 8th house into their career, into their workplace. So they might make professional tantrics, mystics and psychics. The children of the shift, once again, the kids born between 1993 and 96 have this combination. We have covered this in the previous slide, so I won't repeat myself here. So additionally, if this is there, the outer planets, in addition to this arrangement, boy, these people will really revolutionize even tantrics and mysticism. Sagittarius ascendants, when do they make psychics, mediums and herbalists? Well, these are three different kind of energies, difficult to deal with in a single chart, but let me try my best. Now Sagittarius, 9th house being in the ascendant. So when ascendant is pointed at Purva Ashada, okay, and Ketu is in Mula Nakshatra. Mula Nakshatra is already ruled by Ketu. Ketu in Mula Nakshatra want to really dig deep. Access to the other side of the world, even Ketu provides very easily. So when Ketu sits there, the person can be a natural born channeler or a medium. Okay, with this particular arrangement in the first house. Once again, Saturn and Venus in the 8th house of Scorpio, which is sitting now in the 12th house. These people can have very good access to the higher dimensions of spirituality, intuitive ability. With Ketu in the ascendant and Saturn in the conjunct Venus in the 12th, these people can have a career being a psychic or a medium. Sun in the 5th house in Ashwini Nakshatra, where it is exalted, will give them powerful ancestral knowledge which they want to bring to educate themselves. 5th house is the house of education. So they might become famous educators as well, because Sun is exalted here. They might become teachers of spirituality or psychic knowledge, because with that ability between 1st house and 12th house and Sun here, teachers as well. Jupiter in the 8th house. See how much we are focusing on 8th and 12th house when it comes to psychics and mediums. So Jupiter in the 8th house of Ashlesha gives them a knowledge of Kundalini, the knowledge of life force. The tantric knowledge of life force is inherent in them. They will download this as channeled information. Excellent channelers, these people. Mercury in Magha in the 5th house gives them ability to communicate it in a higher learning form, because 9th house is the house of higher knowledge. They might even go to foreign lands and communicate all this knowledge, these people. Now the children of the shift who were born between 1993 and 96 had an additional powerful combination, which in this case is another powerhouse. Their Pluto was in Scorpio, which in Sagittarius ascendants comes in 12th house, and the conjunction of Neptune and Uranus fell in the 2nd house of their family. What is it to have family? What is the root meaning of family? How can our families get better in the world? These children might bring in that. And they have a very dissolved sense of spirituality. If Pluto is in this combination with Saturn and Venus in the 12th house, I mean, these people can become really powerful channelers, bringing in high wisdom information from the revolutionary spiritual information is what I can say. Okay. Now let's look at Capricorn Ascendants, whom could make good preachers, priests and counselors. Now these are kind of advisors of spiritual knowledge, wisdom, psychology, NLP, it can be anything. It can be any field of, counselors can be anything. They can be even masters in psychology, PhD in psychology, child counselors, anything. Capricorn, how does it do that? Well, if the ascendant is in Uttara Ashada, with Mars in the ascendant, because it gives them drive, it gives them aggression, okay, but that is tempered with Jupiter being in the 4th house in Ashlesha, which looks at both the 8th house and the 12th house of spirituality. So this Jupiter will temper this Mars, okay. This Jupiter will become an aggressive, because it's in the 4th aspect from Mars. It will become, this Mars will want to protect this house of 4th house, the house of home and family in the ascendant. So Mars is looking at this Jupiter, so it provides the fiery drive to go and communicate wisdom in the 12th house, and the knowledge of the other side, and of knowledge of spirit, knowledge of mediumship, etc., from the 8th house, where Sun is sitting in Magha. It's exalted in the sign of Leo. So when Sun sits in the sign of Leo in the 8th house, it provides very transparent shamanic access to the other side. But they will gain it in the form of knowledge. And Jupiter looks at the opposite house of Saturn in Swati. Saturn in Swati in the 10th is very exalted. They might want to have a high degree of individuality. You need individuality. These people will be seeking, what do I bring to the table? What is my unique take on spiritual knowledge or psychic ability or mediumship or any one of these things? How can I help the people? Because 7th house is Libra, it's all about other people. So that's why they make good preachers, priests and counselors. Preachers, priests and counselors, what do they have to do? They have to do talking, speaking, speech as a daily profession. Therefore, I have placed Mercury in Mrigshira in the 6th house. 6th house is of daily work. These people will spend their daily work as communication. Okay? Now, for the Capricorn Ascendants, kids who were born in the shift between 1993 and 96, they have a very interesting combination further to the other ones. Neptune and Uranus were conjunct, something that happens once in 168 years. Okay? And then Pluto was in Scorpio, which for a Capricorn Ascendant falls in the 11th house, which is all about social networks, social media. These kids will recalibrate what is social media really for, because Pluto, whichever house it sits in, will completely transform it. This is the house of social media. So these 20 somethings now will create something revolutionary in the social media, because they have the power of Neptune and Uranus in the ascendant. So they have it in their head. They don't need anything from outside. They will channel the whole information. They will just, boom, create new apps, new stuff, which is revolutionary. Another thing in Capricorn which we can see, another kind of mystical profession, would be Kundalini Yoga or Hatha Yoga, something physical. Yoga has to do with physical mind and body unification. So yoga is very physical in nature, the physical form of spirituality, if you will. Kundalini energy, right? It all gives access to Kundalini energy. So what kind of people would want to physically teach or carry out or participate in Kundalini Yoga or Hatha Yoga? Well, the 3rd house, because it stands for hands, hand skill communication. We have put ascendant in Dhanishta, which is ruled by Mars, and Mars in Dhanishta will make them very physical creatures in Capricorn. Saturn, as it is, wants to do ground things. So Mars in Dhanishta will make them very physical creatures, wants to translate everything in physical material terms. Venus in the 3rd house in Revati and Moon in Uttara Bhadrapada makes them drawn towards skill sets which are physical in nature, like yoga. All forms of yoga require that desire for doing physical stretches, yoga of all kinds, maybe even Tai Chi, that kind of thing. Mercury in Mrigshira will want to make them research the subject, go deep into it, maybe even become teachers of it. These are teachers of yoga. This combination will make very good teachers of yoga. Jupiter in Pusha will give them knowledge, higher knowledge, because it sits in the house of Moon. Especially if Moon, I have not put it, Moon is there sitting in the 3rd house. So in the house of Moon there is Jupiter, and in the house of Jupiter there is Moon. So they are making Parivartan Yoga here, which is very good, very, very good. All the qualities are interchanged between the house. That's what Parivartan Yoga means. Saturn being in Hasta again wants to make things physical. and it's being in the house of 9th house of higher learning, these people would want to make that daily work. Teachers of yoga. That's what this Capricorn Ascendant might want to do. Children of the shift we have already covered in the previous slide. Aquarius Ascendant, who would make good Tai Chi, Zen and Qigong teachers. Why is this different? Why Tai Chi, Zen and Qigong? Even Capricorn, the previous one, can do that with that combination we spoke of. But why Tai Chi, Zen and Qigong? Well, Aquarius is a maverick sign. It's ruled by Saturn with Rahu. And if you want to build in Western astrology, it's also co-ruled by Uranus. So, for these people who are born with ascendant in Shattabisha, Shattabisha is itself ruled by Rahu. I have not put in Rahu here, but if Rahu is in the 8th house in Hasta, under Hasta Nakshatra, these people will make even better Tai Chi Qigong practitioners, because being ruled by Rahu and Rahu sitting in the 8th house will give them a desire to study occult and mysticism by default. These are all by default, without anybody telling them anything. Additionally, if I have put Mars in Ashwini and Venus in Bharani in the 3rd house, this will also want to make them everything physical. They are physically skill oriented. Tai Chi, Zen, Qigong are all very physical activities, martial arts, right? The art of martial arts will come for these people naturally. These are natural born ones. Jupiter in Magha Nakshatra in the 7th, okay, we'll look at the 11th house and the 3rd house in the 5th and 9th aspect. So Jupiter is looking at this conjunction of Mars and Venus in the 3rd house, and as well as that Sun. So it wants to learn and become popular as well. Sun here wants to gain fame in social media. So these people might become famous Tai Chi, Zen, Qigong, all this unconventional spiritual teaching of different martial arts kind of sciences. I'm trying to hunt for words here. Need and a coffee. Okay, the children of the shift born in Aquarius Ascendant. This is very interesting because for them, all kids born between 1993 and 96, who are 20 somethings now, we have additionally another interesting combination. They have Pluto in the 10th house. So they will change the idea of what it is to have career. What does it mean to have career? 10th house is of career. And they have Uranus and Neptune conjunct in the 12th house. They are natural born channelers. Natural born channelers. These people can channel like no other. They can bring in galactic knowledge. They can do mediumship. They can do anything they want. This combination is very powerful. Now let's take the Piscean Ascendant. Who would make good yoga and meditation experts, shamans, healers, and tantrics. Now each one of these would require very unique combination. If you want to check out what your combination, whether your child's chart makes this, get in touch with me on Facebook. But let's just examine a sample here, because each one of these is very different energy. If the ascendant is on Uttara Bhadrapada, the 1st house, which has number 12 in it, the sign of Pisces, Uttara Bhadrapada gives a teaching ability by default because Saturn rules it, okay? And that Saturn now is sitting in the 8th house in Chitra Nakshatra, which is very physical, which is very creative, which has got access to lower dimensions. Okay? And then Jupiter sitting in Ashlesha, in Pusha. Jupiter is sitting in the house of Saturn, Nakshatra ruled by Saturn. Okay? In the house of Moon. So Jupiter, I have put conjunct Mars in the 5th house. So their education will be very powerful. They will be good, well educated. Okay, and they will look at higher education as well, because Jupiter looks here from the 5th house towards the 9th house, and it also looks towards the ascendant. It will bless them. These people will be blessed with wisdom. First thing required in addition to psychic knowledge, is the innate wisdom. These are old souls, by the way. I put Ketu in the second house, which gives them a dissolved sense, detachment from their physical beauty. If you have to go towards the direction of yoga, meditation, shamanic healing, etc., you have to be kind of detached from the sensual, physical beauty aspects, don't you think? And that is provided by the Ketu there. Moon conjunct Venus in Rohini is another powerful combination. This will make yoga experts, because Rohini wants to ground everything, and third house is for skills, is for communication. So these become good teachers of yoga. Anything in the third house has to do with physicality. Okay, Mars in third house will make a good athlete, that kind of a thing. So, children of the shift, well, all kids born between 1993 and 96 in this shift, who are 20-somethings right now, had an added unique combination which I want you to take note of. They had Pluto in Scorpio, which in case of Pisces Ascendant falls in the 9th house. Recalibration of higher learning, wisdom, philosophy. That's what they will bring. And Neptune and Uranus conjunct in the 11th house. What does it mean to have a community? What does it mean to connect really with people from all parts of the world? These guys will become social reformers, for sure. They will reform the society in terms of social interaction with one country to another, one community to another, etc. That's very interesting in Pisces. So Pisces can also make good psychics and hypnotists, the last one. How is that possible? Well, if Jupiter is pointing at Revati, conjunct Mars in the first house, this is very unconventional combination. Jupiter conjunct with Mars will make a good hypnotist in Revati, okay? Because we need to see where Mercury is. I haven't placed Mercury anywhere, but let's say if Mercury is in the 4th house sitting in Mrigashira, looking at the 10th house, or in the 10th house in Mula, that makes it additionally, so it will create a Parivartan Yoga. So that's a good combination. But let's look at what we have put. Moon in Ashlesha will give them again exalted moon, access to herbs, access to poisons, access to Kundalini, because moon is in Ashlesha and in the house of education and exalted. Sun in Magha in the 6th house will want to go into domination at work. Sun wants to dominate whatever house it's sitting in. So these people might want to seek, this combination will make for a good hypnotist, because Ashlesha gives them that hypnotic ability. And Sun sitting in Magha will want to dominate the whole thing. Hypnotists want to dominate their audience. They need to basically put all the other minds to sleep. But if you take psychics, again Saturn is sitting in the 8th house. You saw how all signs have, most of them have Saturn sitting in the 8th or 12th. That gives them access to the other dimensions. Saturn is the Karaka for both. The children of the shift we have covered already in the previous slide. We would repeat that. Venus in Dhanishta will give them artistic ability towards spirituality. And again, in Dhanishta, they make good for hypnotists. Less psychics. Psychics will come from the Saturn, which is sitting in Chitra. So guys, this is my take on what kind of different ascendants make for all these mystical arts, mystical sciences, shamans, healers, tantrics, occultists, astrologers, etc. There's lots more combinations possible. So if you don't know where your child has what kind of combination, if they're not doing well in school and want all other kinds of things, you get in touch with me on Facebook. Maybe we can have a one-on-one Zoom and then we can talk about it more. I do more of personal one-on-one consultations rather than having a website. The reason being, I find it more personal and more one-to-one, is more intimate interaction with people. Okay? Take care.